ITIL Service Level Management. As we progress through this ITIL series, we've already parsed a lot of information out of several books of the ITI library. We just finished, as a matter of fact, a chunk of knowledge from the Service Transition book as we looked at configuration management. Well, now we're going to dive into the OGC's Continual Service Improvement book. The one with the 5-armed starfish on the cover. And as it so happens, we have 5 key points to explore concerning service level management. So relax, grab a cool, refreshing drink, and let's curl up with a good book. Continual Service Improvement. In this 10th nugget of the ITIL CBT Nugget series, we're going to look at 5 key points, just like the starfish. First of all, we're going to look at key terminology as it relates to service level management. We'll look at the goals and the scope of SLM. We'll also discuss the costs versus the benefits. We'll look at the SLM process in great detail, and then we'll finish off investigating the role of the service level manager. On several occasions throughout this Nugget series, I've referred to service level agreements and service levels. What we're going to do here is look at some key terminology that you really need to know for the ITIL Foundations exam as it relates to service level management. The first term is service level itself, and this is basically reported and measured achievement or accomplishment against one or more service level targets. In other words, how are you doing as it relates to your service level target, which is the next term. And a service level target is from the Service Design book and the Continual Service Improvement book. And basically a target is a commitment. It's a documented commitment in your service level agreement. It's based on the service level requirements, and you must have these to ensure that your IT service design is what we call fit for purpose. I defined fit for purpose earlier on in this Nugget series. A service level target should adhere to the SMART philosophy, S-M-A-R-T. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. This acronym helps us realize and remember that our targets in our service level agreements and project plans should be SMART. You must memorize this for your exam. That being said, a service level agreement is an agreement between an IT service provider, like your company or your organization, and a customer or a user. The service level agreement is going to define the IT services, the documents. It documents the service level targets. Again, the targets need to be SMART. And it's going to designate the responsibilities of the IT service provider, what you're going to provide, and what the customer is going to provide. Keep in mind, a single SLA could cover a bunch of IT services, or it could even cover multiple customers with a blanket agreement. An SLA can also be referred to as an operational level agreement, OLA. SLM stands for Service Level Management. Again, part of the Service Design and Continual Service Improvement books of the library, the SLM process is responsible for negotiating our service level agreements and making sure that they're all met. SLM is the blanket governing process for ensuring that all IT service management processes, operational level agreements, and any contracts are appropriate for our agreed upon service level targets. SLR stands for Service Level Requirement. A service level requirement is basically a requirement for the customer. Okay, it's a customer requirement for a certain aspect or a certain area of an IT service. For example, as a service provider, you might provide hardware and software solutions, but the customer is going to provide the training. Or the customer would provide the hardware and software, and you're going to provide the tech support and the service desk. SLRs are based on business objectives, and you use these SLRs to negotiate your agreed upon service level targets. Another example of a requirement in a service level agreement is where the demarcation point is going to be for your network connectivity to a service provider. Again, maybe the customer, maybe the provider. Where is the CPE, the customer premises equipment, going to be stored or located? Is the CPE device or devices going to be located at the customer premises side, or are you going to have the CPE devices at the service provider? That would be a good example of a service level requirement. Next, we have what's called a service hour. A service hour is an agreed upon time period. This is the period when an IT service, a particular IT service, should be available. For example, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 or 8 to 6, except public holidays. If you're doing huge migrations or data backups, these may extend to other hours. For example, the middle of the night, early in the morning, or maybe even on the weekend. It depends on your organization. Think of a service hour as kind of a billable hour when an attorney or an accountant is available. And finally, we have SCM, Service Capacity Management. SCM is responsible for understanding the performance and the capacity of all of our IT services. Problem management, availability management, capacity management, change management, and the resources used by each IT service, as well as the pattern usage over time. This is determined by collecting, recording, and analyzing data that will be used in different types of plans, by different committees, steering groups, or working groups. Service capacity management is tightly coupled to business capacity management and component capacity management, and we'll talk more about this later on in this Nugget series. The main goals of service level management is to have an ongoing campaign to maintain and enhance the quality of IT services in the organization or the business. And this is done by constantly building consensus, constantly monitoring the processes, and reporting or logging based on that information, and thus eliminating poor service and services. Another goal of SLM is to build solid, productive, long-term relationships with all the involved parties. The service provider, the customer, the vendors, consultants, contractors, and so on. The SLM is going to be involved in basically every aspect of IT service provisioning, all of the IT services. The scope is also going to be concerned with customer and vendor negotiations, which ties in directly to relationships. Service level management is basically at the top of the responsibility chain. In other words, the buck stops here. Let me show you. Here's some concepts I alluded to earlier in this Nugget series. And notice how service level management is at the top of this, we can call it a food chain, or I could have drawn this out as a pyramid. And if I would have, we would have up here in this top third, service level management, SLM. Below that, you've got other management IT services that we're going to be looking at for the remaining 5 Nugget movies of this ITIL Nugget series. And that's things like IT framework management, capacity management, availability management, IT service continuity management. So SLM really has a hands-on relationship with these upper tier management processes. As a matter of fact, these upper tier services, service level management, availability, IT service continuity, capacity, and IT framework are often referred to as the tactical aspect of responsibility. And then down here what we have is really 2 different categories. You've got problem management and change management, which we know are tightly coupled. But under problem management, you've got the service desk and incident management. And under change management, you've got release management and configuration management. And you may actually design your ITIL service solution this way, partitioning up these different management responsibilities to individuals, to working groups, to steering groups, to teams based on these modular approaches. Now, this is the tactical aspect. Down here we have what is called the operational responsibility. Think of this more as kind of the hands-on. If you're a Star Trek fan, think of this as the tactical weapons engineer, maybe, Worf. If you ever watched the Next Generation, this is Worf up on the bridge, and the operational, this is what we call the away team, okay? The ones that go down there and get their hands dirty. And as you know, when they sent the away team away, any of the personnel who had a different colored shirt on, chances are they aren't coming back. So, but that's not the case here. But kind of look at it this way, as tactical versus operational. These are all under the umbrella of service level management and that manager or team of managers. Obviously, service level management is one of those things that's going to be very particular to your organization or your business type. But that being said, there are some costs to take into consideration before you put together your service level management solution, as well as, of course, many benefits to following the ITIL recommendations. First of all, as far as costs are concerned, realize that a lot of research has to be done in advance. A lot of informed decisions with customers must be made. Therefore, the lines of communication, the communication channels between you and your customers, between the service providing and the customer service, must be free-flowing and more than adequate. Other costs to SLM are the staffing costs, personnel, accommodation, coming up with specific solutions, specific components and products to meet the needs of the organization and the business. Support tools, which generally comes in software and software licensing. Of course, there's hardware costs, servers, network infrastructure, database costs, and of course marketing. Marketing these services, advertising them to your customers. Now, these are some costs. Now, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of service level management, which we, of course, defined in the beginning of this nugget? Well, SLM is going to lead to improved relationships with your users and your customers. It's going to improve and validate the customer perception of information technology, and that's typically through management of the service desk. But there are other IT services as well that are going to be presented to customers that are going to be the interface, the look and feel of IT. SLM allows you to create a clear demarcation point between your different IT groups and between IT and your customers. And that's very important because you have to know where the communication lines are, where the demarcation points are for responsibility, for delegation, for accommodation, for staffing, and for allocating all the different tools and hardware for the solutions. Service level management allows you to isolate targets for enhanced measurement, enhanced reporting. This is an ongoing assessment of the process. It also allows you to make IT goals that are much more business-centric, which is a huge challenge today. Many times IT is wrapped up in the technology. They want newer, they want faster, they want more features. But the bottom line is, how does it meet the needs of business? And that's really the goal of service level management, to kind of be that liaison, that common ground between IT and the business itself. SLM can help facilitate expectations, making sure that everything is agreed upon and that expectations are met. They allow you to put down a baseline for measuring the vendor performance and customer performance. It allows you to clearly define the IT services for the organization. These are the benefits of SLM. Again, the buck stops here. Like all of the other IT services, the service level management module or service has its own activities or its own process. And also like the others, there's about 6 or 7 steps to this process: identifying, defining, finalizing, monitoring, reporting, and reviewing. This is the process. But remember, this is a high-level tactical approach, as the service level management team and the manager serves as the interface or the liaison between IT and the users and customers and others. So the first goal of SLM is to identify the customer needs and how those customer needs can be met by IT services. It's also identifying what types of services are available from the provider. Identify and define the customer needs in the service level requirements. This should be done on a regular basis. It should be initiated by reports, reviews, summaries, and it should be done at the request of the customer or for the overall benefit of the IT organization. This could be a new service or it could be an existing service that we're talking about here. The second step is defining the scope and the depth of the customer requirements, all under the umbrella of service level management. This is going to be done according to the ISO 9001 model. And we talked about this earlier, the quality assurance model. So the design process should follow several steps: design, develop, produce, install, and maintain. Once all the specifications have been put into place and the IT organizations effectively translated the business needs into IT configurations, IT resources and services, you can then draw up or modify documentation. And that's the finalization process, or finalizing, or we could call this the contract phase. Of course, this is going to deal with our service level agreements. And the service level agreement will be based on a wide variety of aspects. The physical nature of the organization, its geographical distribution, its complexity, its scale, cultural aspects like language. Is it profit or non-profit? What are the policies of the organization? The nature of the business activity. Are they 24/7? Do they work 8 hours a day? Are they basically a global web-based business? Are they a mom and pop business that's regionally located? Okay, all these types of things. Then once you get to past the contract phase, then of course you're going to want to do an ongoing monitoring. Monitoring the clearly defined service levels in advance and make sure they correspond with the agreed upon objectives. Again, these service levels have to be monitored from the point of view of the customer or the user. Don't just limit it to the technical aspects as an IT geek, okay? Also take in the customer's point of view. As a matter of fact, you should begin there. When we're talking about the technical objectives, we're going to be relying upon availability management and capacity management that we're going to look at later on in this ITIL Nugget series. Along with the monitoring, from the monitoring will come the logs and the documentation and the reporting. Okay, this is an ongoing process of creating service reports at different intervals, and these should be documented within the service level agreements, comparing the agreed service levels to the actual service levels that are being measured and delivered. You want to know about availability, you want to know about service downtime, average response times, transaction rates, functional errors, okay? Any frequency or duration of service degradation, how many users during certain peak periods, successful attempts to get around security, unsuccessful attempts to get around security, service capacity, changes, the costs, all these things should be reported. And finally, you'll go through, as a service level management team, a review process, perhaps every 3 months, perhaps twice a year, perhaps on an annual basis, reviewing the entire process at regular intervals, comparing the new service level agreements to the previous review that you did, let's say 6 months ago, tackling any problems that are related to the services, identifying service trends, identifying new technologies and new possible changes to come in the next 18 months, for example, implementing any changes to the service level agreements, to the service level requirements. Also, assessing the consequences of failure on the part of the customer or the vendor to provide the agreed upon service levels. This is the service level management process: identify, define, finalize, or contract phase, monitor, report, and review. Finally, let's talk about the service level management team manager. This could be the team leader. It could be the leader of the working group. Typically, though, SLM itself is a team-oriented function. The goal of service level management is to manage the interfacing between customers and IT. And so I cannot emphasize to you more how important it is for this manager or the leader of this particular team to be somebody who has a deep and wide knowledge of network infrastructure, of computing, of all of the services that organizations use, from database services to network bandwidth services, mail services, collaboration application services. They need to have a deep and a broad knowledge combined with excellent interpersonal skills. Think of this person almost as an ambassador to another country who has a deep and experiential knowledge of that country that they're an ambassador to. So they are an interface. They are a liaison between IT and customers. Remember the customer here, this is a different kind of term than the customer, the person who walks into a 7-Eleven, for example. Now, the SLM manager is an advocate for both the customer and IT. So they walk a very fine line. They're almost like a real estate agent who is a broker representing both a buyer and a seller, which, as we know, can be fraught with all kinds of problems. So this person has to be very patient, very knowledgeable, and also very diplomatic. Okay? They need to be a facilitator. They need to be a problem solver. They need to be a consensus builder. He or she needs to be able to bring parties together and, if necessary, arbitrate conflicts between these two parties. The SLM manager must strive to be as objective and impartial as possible, even though this manager may be under the employ of the service provider or the customer. Either way, they need to be as objective as possible. So the manager needs this rare combination of technical expertise, both deep and broad, also having their finger on the pulse of the future technologies that are coming down the pike, future solutions. They also need to understand the business and where the business is going. They also need to have great interpersonal skills between all the parties. Remember, communicating with IT staffing and engineers and administrators is a whole different ball of wax than talking to a customer who doesn't have the technical expertise. Although they're experts in their own areas, they may not understand all the ins and outs of the technology. So it's a very, very delicate situation. But it's also one, if you want to pursue this, maybe all the way up to a chief information officer, it is a great career. And the ITIL path is one that can help you get there. The service level manager needs to be intimate with all the other IT service areas, not just simply what's going on there at the top, and their direct interface with things like availability management or capacity management on the technical side, on the tactical side, but they also need to be available to and knowledgeable of what's going on the hands-on side. Remember my Star Trek analogy, the away team, change management, problem management, incident management, all these other IT service areas. That's why the SLM manager should be an ITIL practitioner or ITIL manager, going beyond just the foundations and the fundamentals. The goal of the SLM manager and his or her team is to align all the operational and tactical IT processes, the one I just mentioned, with the business objectives, always keeping the customer needs and desires in mind. And again, all of this is going to be aligned with service level requirements and service level agreements. Let me just tell you from experience, if you were hired to be the service level manager or to be on this team of people, one of the first things that you want to do is, after you assess the entire organization and business, is put together some type of awareness campaign. And this is where kind of marketing comes in too. And I don't want you to think of marketing. There's this new show on TV on AMC called Mad Men, and it's about all these advertising guys from the early 1960s. Fascinating show, because you kind of understand where all of our advertising and marketing comes from. But when we talk about marketing, we're talking about awareness, okay? An awareness campaign to give individuals the information they need about all the processes, all the things that are under development, and understanding and getting buy-in and support from all the parties. Because as a manager, you have to clearly define the tasks, who are the authorities, who has responsibilities with all of the IT services and all of the IT processes, and make sure that you're able to distinguish between controlling the process, which is a management tactical function, and the actual operational task. And this is where you come into contact with the customer. So the SLM manager has to have an intimate knowledge of these relationships and these dynamics. In the service level management nugget of the ITIL Nugget series, we attacked 5 key concepts. First of all, we explored the different key terminology of service level management and service level agreements. You have to know that terminology for your ITI fundamentals exam. We also looked at the goals and the scope of service level management. We explored the cost versus the benefits. We looked at the 6-part SLM process: identifying, defining, finalizing, monitoring, reporting, and reviewing. And we then explored the role of the service level manager and his or her part of the SLM team or working group. I hope this CBT has been informative for you. I want to thank you for viewing. Enjoy the rest of your day.